Hey everybody, it's Brian Meek here from KMU. Today we're going to be having a course on defensive driving, and this course should take a little bit less than an hour. We've got some good things to think about: hazard recognition, situational awareness, those type of things. Got a couple videos for you to show, and maybe we'll get some questions and answers in. So thanks for joining us today for this video. So we're going to be talking about defensive driving, and three things that we're really going to focus on today. One, identifying the hazards that are out there. And remember, that's part of KMU Common Sense Safety, right? Identifying hazards and then figuring out ways to either mitigate or reduce the hazard or eliminate, preferably eliminate the hazard, right? The second thing we're going to talk about is how to understand or to understand defensive driving techniques. And really what that is it comes down to situational awareness. Again, one of our KMU Common Sense safety categories, right? Situational awareness. How aware are you of what's going on around you and yourself and your actions and how they are affecting other drivers? So we're going to spend some time focusing on that. The third thing we're going to talk about is actual techniques. So once we've identified the hazards, once we've talked about good situational awareness and things to think about with you and other people, then I'm going to give you some tips on actual techniques you can do to prevent those accidents and injuries while you're on the road. So looking at our defense in depth Swiss cheese model, right? And as a quick review, there's 5 portions of this. The first one is training, and that's why we're here today, right? We're getting our training on defensive driving, making sure that we remember how to identify hazards and those type of things. So we're going to have good training. The second thing we do is we make sure that we do a good hazard analysis. So are we identifying the hazards that are out there, and then not just identifying them, but are we doing something about it? Are we mitigating the hazard? Or if possible, can we eliminate the hazard altogether? That's really going to be one of the things that we talk about today when it comes to defensive driving. Really important part of it. The next piece of cheese, or the next focus area that we talk about, is situational awareness. The number one most important item when it comes to defensive driving. You have to be aware of what's going on in your vehicle and the vehicles around you in order to make good decisions to prevent accidents and injuries from happening. The fourth one is policies and procedures. This really goes in with the other ones. Are we obeying speed laws? Are we stopping at stop signs? Are we keeping our minimum distances between us and the vehicle in front of us? All of those policies and procedures really play a role in our ability to drive safe and drive defensively to prevent ourselves from getting into an accident. So that's the fourth area, right? And then the last area, PPE. And with PPE, our number one PPE is what in a car? Seat belts, right? Making sure that you have your seatbelt buckled and you're wearing it at all time. And we're going to talk about how your seatbelt itself will help you in an injury, in the event that you actually have an accident, and how actually wearing a seatbelt may prevent you from making some mistakes that would actually cause the accident. Now, in order to get the right frame of mind and the right picture for what we're talking about, I wanted to go over some driving safety statistics with you. And when you think about it, you personally may not be in a traffic accident very often. Some of you may be saying, well, I've never even been in a traffic accident, so I'm a very good driver, right? Potentially. Maybe you're just lucky, because one injury accident occurs in this country every 18 seconds. Think about that. In the time that we've already spent here, there has been about 6 or 7 injury accidents in the United States. In the time that we've already spent just in this minute and a half or so that we've been talking here. So injury accidents happen all the time in the United States. Over 2 million injuries occur every year that disable somebody that's driving in a vehicle or riding in a vehicle. 2 million disabling injuries every year. A person dies in an auto accident every 11 minutes. Every 11 minutes. So in the course of this class, approximately 5 people will have died in an auto accident while we're talking about how to save our lives while driving. So it's a very high risk activity that we do. The ramifications of poor driving and not paying attention to what's going on could be life or death. And keep that in mind when you think about some of the mistakes that we make while we're driving and basically how to prevent those mistakes from happening. And then 1 out of every 4 fatal work injuries involves a vehicle accident. So it's actually the number one way or number one cause of death at your workplace is in a vehicle. So think about that when you're driving around in a city vehicle, whether it's a truck or a city car or whatever it is. that you are most likely to be injured doing that than you are in any other thing that you do that encompasses your work. So it's very important to keep the right frame of mind and the focus on the idea that driving is one of the most dangerous things that we do every day. So let's figure out how to be better drivers, right? And we're going to do that today. The first thing I'm going to talk about is human error, and that's the biggest hazard that we have out there. Making mistakes and the impact that not only that mistake may have on us, but it may have on other people is really vital to understanding how to be a good defensive driver and minimize our chances of getting into an auto accident. The first human error mistake that we make quite often is reckless driving. Things like speeding, weaving through traffic, ignoring signs, signals, tailgating, trying to squeeze in at the last minute, dangerous passing, all of those type of things, right? And those are easily preventable by taking a deep breath and taking our time and understand that the difference between getting in front of a car and behind this car is a couple seconds. And is your life really worth that extra couple seconds that you gained by trying to squeeze in between two cars? Just take your time, make sure you leave yourself safe distances, especially when merging and going into traffic. Those extra few seconds that you're going to gain, you're going to forget about by the time you get out of your car. So keep that in mind, right? Besides reckless driving, there's really distracted driving. Using your cell phone, putting on makeup, eating, drinking, writing, or reading. I see people, especially in stop and go traffic, you'll see somebody pull out a newspaper and read. It's amazing what people do when they think that the traffic isn't going anywhere, right? You can also get wrapped up in your thoughts, whether you're listening to an audiobook or thinking about something that's going on. Think about a time, and I think almost everybody has probably done this before, when you're driving and it's a boring drive, you're on, Interstate 70, or you're out driving on an interstate and you're thinking about things, whether it's work or home related, and the next thing you know, you don't realize where you're at. You kind of snap back to, and all of a sudden you realize, wait a second, where am I? Did I miss my exit? How long have I been driving without knowing where I'm at? And you may have no recollection of that. And really, you were driving an autopilot, and your brain was somewhere else, and you were just going with the flow. And that's a scary feeling to have, right? And that is a form of distracted driving. So think about that. Think about things that you can do, and we'll have some examples later on, to prevent those things from distracting you so that you're paying attention to what's going on while you're driving. How about fatigue? Fatigue's another one that really gets to a lot of people. You just want to push it through a little bit further. We do this a lot when we're going on vacation. I need to make it to the next city so that I can stop at that hotel I want to stop at. Or if I just drive for 4 more hours, it'll be 2 a.m, but I'll get to my destination. It's not worth it. Again, if you were to get into an accident because you fall asleep at the wheel, or because your reaction time is slower because you're fatigued, all that time that you think you would have gained, you just lost. Not only that, but you got injured, you damaged your car, maybe you hurt or killed somebody else, right? So there's lots of factors that go into it. If you're fatigued, you need to get off the road and get yourself going again. One thing that you don't want to do is rely on things like rolling down the windows, turning the radio up, drinking more coffee. Those are only temporary measures. And if you're really fatigued, they may help you for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe even only 2 minutes, and you're going to be right back to where you were before. So fatigue driving creates poor judgment, slow reaction times, and can get you killed. It's a mistake that's very common that we need to try to curb. Aggressive driving, kind of like reckless driving, right? Do you have to be the first one to get there? Do you have to cut that person off? Blowing your horn at people, not as a hazard, but to tell them to get out of the way, flashing your lights, making obscene or angry gestures, yelling at people, right? Those type of things. Not only does that affect those people, it also affects you. So when you're driving like that, you're at a much higher risk of getting into an accident, and you don't know what you're going to force somebody else to do and maybe they will make a maneuver that they're not comfortable making, and they will end up getting into an accident. So reckless driving and aggressive driving both are human error that we can actually eliminate by taking our time, being more patient with people, and avoiding those situations. One thing that we don't think about a lot of time when it comes to human error is keeping our vehicles in the proper maintenance, with the proper maintenance and in the proper condition. This ensures that hazards, we're aware of all the hazards that are out there. I remember back when I was in the Navy and I didn't have a lot of money, I was driving around on bald tires on my car, and they were so bald that the steel belts that were in the tires were actually poking through some of the rubber in places and sparking on the road as I was driving down the road. Now, I didn't realize they were that bad until one of my friends was driving behind me, and when we stopped wherever we were going, they said, "Did you know that your car is sparking?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean my car is sparking?" "Yeah, your tires are sparking. I don't know how your rubber tires are sparking, but they're sparking." And when I looked at it, you could actually see the steel belts in the rubber tire. So huge condition, right? Not only for a blowout or causing a fire or something like that, but that could have caused some real damage. Part of that was my ignorance of not really understanding that I needed to maintain that better. I thought that I could just drive slower, avoid slippery conditions, and that I was going to be okay until I went and bought those new tires. And really, I was trying to avoid the expense. What I didn't think about was, had I crashed my car, I would have had a lot more expense than just buying a couple new tires. So sometimes when we think about vehicle maintenance, we tend to overlook things because we think we can get by in the short run, and we're not thinking about the long run. So although it may not seem obvious at first, one really key component to defensive driving is making sure that we keep our vehicles in those safe conditions. The last human error item I want to talk about is driving under the influence. And really, when it comes to driving under the influence, it doesn't matter if you've had 1 or 2 or 3 drinks. The best way to eliminate that hazard or to remove that hazard is simply don't drink and drive at all. Rather than testing what your limit is and knowing that you can have X number of drinks before you are impaired, it's better just to say, if I've had 1 drink, I've had 1 too many. And if you plan on driving, don't drink at all. That way you never have to have that concern of whether you've had too many to drink or not. And it completely removes that from the situation. So those are some human errors that we can prevent. We can eliminate those hazards. The reckless driving, the aggressive driving, driving while fatigued, distracted driving, making sure our vehicle is in good condition, and driving under the influence. All of those items we have 100% control over, and we can eliminate those hazards so that they never come into effect with human error, or never come into the possibility of us getting into an accident because of our own human error, right? So the next thing we need to talk about is our dangerous conditions. Now, you may think that the conditions on the road out there you don't have any control over, and that's partially true. However, you do have control over how you drive over those dangerous conditions. So let's think about bad weather to start, right? Rain, fog, wind, snow, ice. What do we do about driving in bad weather? Well, one, we can decide not to drive. If there's too much snow, if you can't see because of the fog, if the roads are icy, just choose not to drive. So we've now eliminated those hazards. But if we run into those hazards while we're driving, it starts to snowing, it starts raining, right? It starts getting foggy. What are some things that we can do? One, slow down, right? If we slow down, we have more control over the vehicle, and we're able to control it in those slippery conditions that are sometimes created by bad weather. As it gets foggy, increase the distances between you and other vehicles so that if they do have to stop, you can also stop. Turn your lights on. Many states require that while driving in the rain, you have your lights already on, especially if you don't have daytime running lights. Turn your lights on when the weather gets bad. That way other vehicles can see you. So if something happens to you or they're not paying attention, you are much more visible to them and less likely to be a hazard to them also. You can have difficult road conditions, sharp curves, busy intersections, uneven surfaces, obstacles in the road, all that kind of stuff. Again, with difficult road conditions, typically you're going to be warned of it by a sign on the road or some sort of warning. So sharp curves are going to tell you what the recommended speed for going around that curve is. If you're on a 70-mile-an-hour road, speed limit is 70 miles an hour on the road, and the curve sign tells you 45 miles an hour, you should be going about 45 miles an hour when you go around that curve. You should not try to take that curve at full speed. That caution is telling you that it is too sharp of a turn to take at full speed. That is exacerbated by poor road conditions. So if it's raining and it's a 45-mile-an-hour curve, you're going to want to slow down to less than 45 miles an hour. That way you don't slip off of that road as you go around that curve. So take into consideration, along with difficult road conditions, that it could be compounded by things such as bad weather or poor lighting or those type of things. Right? At night, your depth perception is not as good at night. You have to deal with glare. Sometimes if you have glasses, the glare is increased by your glasses. If you have an old windshield in your car, older windshields that have pot marks and things on them that can magnify the intensity of some of the lights of oncoming headlights, all of those things can create conditions where it's more difficult to see and more hazardous for you. That lowers your ability to react if something abnormal were to happen. And really that's what we want to do. We're going to talk about these techniques today about, slowing down and hazard recognition and those type of things. It's all about giving you the right amount of time and enough time that if something abnormal happens, you have the time and ability to react in a safe manner. That's what defensive driving is about, maximizing that reaction time and reaction ability, and then knowing what to do in those situations. What do you do when there's road work? So when you're in a construction area, maybe you're reduced from 2 lanes to 1, right? Now your available options, if something abnormal were to happen, are reduced. If you have Jersey barriers and cones, you may not be able to swerve to miss an obstacle that drops in front of you. So you have to change your driving habits. You may have to slow down and allow more space in front of you, between you and the vehicle in front of you, so that if something does happen, you have more time to stop. You also should be paying attention to how far vehicles are behind you, because if you have to stop suddenly, somebody could rear end you if they're not paying as much attention either. So heavy traffic, road work, those type of things can create more issues, right? The last thing I want to talk about is accidents. And you hear the term rubbernecking, and you think about people that slow down, and there's always traffic jams when going around an accident. That creates its own hazards, right? When you slow down, you take your eyes off the road, and you're looking at what happened in an accident. You may have somebody tailgate or somebody rear end behind you. You're causing other traffic incidents. So you need to be safe, get around the person or the people that have the accident, give them enough space so that you're not being a hazard to them. But at the same time, don't sit and rubberneck and create more hazards behind you for the cars that are behind you. Now, we're going to watch a video on hazard detection and situational awareness. This is geared towards teen drivers, but it's a really good video, and I think that it brings up a lot of good points that we don't really think about a lot.
Hazard recognition is not just about identifying obvious hazards. It's also about recognizing subtle or hidden hazards, and that's where teens need the most help. In this lesson, you learn to identify hidden hazards by recognizing masks. In driving, a mask is anything that blocks your vision of the roadway or surrounding area, like large vehicles, curves, or weather. Basically, it's anything that hides information that you need to make a street-smart decision. Clues are another great way to identify possible hazards. They give you the hints you need for anticipating what will happen next. Some of the most important clues you don't want to let slide are the taillights of vehicles in front of you. These let you know that the car in front is reducing its speed and that you should be ready for something ahead. Advisory road signs. Here you ought to be watching out for a hard-to-find stop sign. Dangerous or distracted driving by others around you. School zone signs, school buses, ice cream trucks, or a ball bouncing into the road. These are clues that there are kids in the street. Roadkill or wildlife are clues that more animals are in the area and you need to slow down. Drivers often fail to anticipate hazards because masks and clues come too fast or at the same time. This is especially hard if your teen is still working on basic driving skills. But given the time to practice and becoming familiar with your driving environment, your teen will know where to look behind the masks and what to look for based on the clues, and have the information they need to find hidden hazards and avoid them.
All right, so that was some pretty good information. I like the concept of masks, right? Things that may be blocking you or that you aren't seeing the whole picture. And it's really important, that hazard recognition, right? And we talked about that area on our KMU safety, common sense safety program, right? That defense in depth, that hazard recognition is really important. And it's really the first step, identifying those hazards with enough time to be able to think about what you can do. Now, what are some different ways that you can do that, right? If you slow down and you're driving at a reasonable speed, given the road conditions, the weather conditions, and the amount of potential hazards that are out there, the more likely you are going to be able to see those hazards and be able to take evasive action if necessary. I like in the beginning of that video how they show the garbage truck and that there's a car turning on the other side of the garbage truck that you can't see. If you're anticipating that you can't see around that garbage truck, and you expect there to be somebody there, then when you pull out and that person actually is there, you already know what you're going to do in case that person pulls out. You're going to move over or get out of the way because you expected it. If nobody's there, then great. It's not going to be an issue, right? But by expecting those things to happen, you're giving yourself enough time and enough thought to be able to prevent an accident rather than just simply reacting when you really don't have a chance. So I really like a lot of that stuff in those videos. Now, I want to talk about seatbelts really quick. So seatbelts are one of our forms of PPE that we have for our car or our vehicle, right? They save over 100,000 lives since seatbelts were mandated as being required. They really prevent you from crashing into the steering wheel, the dash, or the windshield. They keep you inside your vehicle in case of a crash. They protect your bodily organs, right? Improve your chance of remaining conscious in the event of a serious injury. And they keep you behind the wheel if you must swerve or brake suddenly. So although we typically say that seatbelts are there to protect you in the event you have an accident, they do have some effect on preventing you from having an accident to begin with. If you have to swerve and the seatbelt keeps you in place and it keeps you in a good spot where you can make another evasive action, then it's also done its job there to prevent the actual incident from happening, not just prevent the injury. So, you're 25 times more likely to be killed in an accident if you're thrown from the vehicle than if you stay in the vehicle. So seatbelts really do make a difference. And my question to you is, do you always buckle up when you're behind the wheel? Do you make your kids and your spouses, family members, friends, do you make them buckle up when you're driving and you're in the vehicle? Think about how much that can save your life and what it can do for you. And I think that it's one of the easiest things to do, and it also gets you the most ability to really save your life in the event of an injury. So one of the other things we talked about was vehicle maintenance, right? Making sure that you have regular tune-ups, oil changes, fluid levels are in the right spot, right? Your brakes are good. When's the last time you had your brakes checked? Do you follow your manufacturer's recommendation for tune-ups and for those type of inspections? Do you check your tires? I gave you the instance earlier where I was kind of ignorant when I was in my late teens, early 20s about making sure that I checked these kind of things. I guess I had always counted on my parents to do them before, right? But so do you check your tires, make sure they're inflated? Do you have a flat tire warning light? Do you rely on that flat tire warning light? I know that I've had instances where I've had a tire that's been slowly leaking, and I know that about every 2 weeks I'm going to have to go put some air into it, and that I'll get my little flat tire warning. Or when it gets really cold out, I'll get my flat tire warning because the air has become more dense in that tire. If you have instances like that, how long do you let it go before you actually check it? Do you get the flat tire warning sign and say, well, I know that it's going to happen because I have a slow leaker, and I know that I've got plenty of air in that tire, so I'm going to let it go. I'm not even going to look. How many times does it take to do that before you actually have a flat, you don't realize it, and you drive on your flat and you totally destroy your tire or totally destroy your rim, or you get into an accident? So remember, even with some of those indicators that we have, we still have to do the right thing and make sure that we're checking and making sure that everything is working properly. Do you rotate your tires to make sure that they have even wear? When's the last time you checked to make sure your brake lights work, or you have both headlights and that your signals work? A lot of times now these are taken care of when we get our oil changes, but now that we don't change oil necessarily every 3,000 miles and we go a lot longer because we have better oil and better engine technologies, we don't check those as often as we did. So think about that. When's the last time you checked those things? If your brake lights go out and you're in a situation where you brake quickly and the person behind you doesn't know you're braking, that's one of the worst things that can happen, right? So make sure that you're checking those things. Do you do a pre-drive inspection? With company vehicles, a lot of cities have put into place the requirement, especially with larger vehicles like bucket trucks or digger derricks or service vehicles, that you perform a 360-degree inspection around the vehicle prior to use. Walk around the vehicle, make sure that everything looks good, that there's no issues. Also, if you are a utility worker and you're out in neighborhoods, make sure that there's no children playing around your vehicle. I remember an incident from a previous employer that I worked at where a line worker was walking around their bucket truck after a job in a neighborhood, and they found a toddler playing in the wheel well of their bucket truck. They were playing hide and go seek. And had that driver not done the walk around and saw that kid in that wheel well, he could have started his truck up and run right over the kid. So it's really important that we look for those type of things, especially in situations like that. Look at your tires. Look for leaks under your vehicle. Do you have a big oil leak all of a sudden that wasn't there before? Or is your radiator leaking or anything like that? Are your windows clean enough for you to be able to see? Or are you the type of person that scrapes a hole about this big in the frost in your window, thinking that by the time you actually get out onto a main road, your defrost is going to have removed all of that frost from your window and you'll be able to see more? That's not safe, right? So are your windows clean with nothing blocking your vision? When you do scrape frost off your windshields, do you scrape it off the side windows and your side mirrors, or do you just do it in the front where you can see? Make sure you're giving yourself the full range of vision that you need. Are your mirrors properly adjusted? If somebody else has been driving the vehicle, do you adjust the mirrors back to your needs before you start the vehicle, or do you just take off and then the first time you look in your rearview mirror you realize you can't see behind you? Again, do all of these things prior to starting the vehicle, right? What about when you're carrying a load? As you can see in this picture here, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, right? Don't overload your vehicle. Make sure that everybody has a seat belt and a seat. Don't put people in the back of a pickup truck and drive them down the street, right? Make sure the cargo is secured so it won't shift around while you're driving or come out of the back of a truck or anything like that that could endanger either you, your vehicle, or the person that's driving behind you. And then be certain your vision's not blocked. If your vision is blocked, have you taken the right precautions to make sure that you can see around you? Do you have the right mirror extensions? Do you have a spotter so that you can back up? Those type of things. Make sure that when you're carrying a load, you realize that you've changed the way that you're operating that vehicle and that you're taking the extra precautions that you need. Some other things that we need to do, right? We need to take some precautions to avoid collisions. Okay, 2-car collisions are among the most common type of traffic incident. About 1/3 of 2-car collisions occur at intersections. So be especially careful when entering an intersection. Kind of like I talked about before. If you're going through an intersection, you should be looking both ways to see if everybody realizes that, hey, there's a stop sign, there is a red light from the other direction, and that they have to stop. Because if they're not paying attention and they're not going to stop, you need to be the one to either stop, swerve, move, whatever, hit your horn, whatever you need to do so that you don't become an injury. But if you don't become an accident. But if you're not paying attention to what other people are doing at intersections, then you're not driving defensively, you're driving offensively, right? Head-on collisions are particularly dangerous and can be deadly. The The key to avoiding them is to keep looking ahead down the road for possible problems. Again, see what's coming, see what the hazards are that are out there. If a crash looks like it's coming, slow down, right? You can even get off to the side of the road if you have room in order to avoid a head-on crash. When you go to pass somebody on a 2-lane road, make sure you're giving enough room so that you can see a long way away so that you know that if you encounter any issues, you can slow down and get back behind that vehicle, or you can get around them with enough time. Don't misjudge the amount of time you need when you're passing vehicles on a 2-lane road. Even when you're passing vehicles on a 4-lane road, like an interstate or something like that, you need to be aware of what options you have. If you're passing a big truck and that truck doesn't see you, do you have room on the left where if they start to move left, can you move left onto the shoulder so that they don't hit you? Or what's their situation? Is there a car right in front of them, and as you're passing them, are they going to try to pass the car in front of them and not be able to see you? All of those things you need to try to predict, right? Because that's going to help you with what your behavior is when you're driving. Now, rear-end collisions. Rear-end collisions are also dangerous, but they're preventable too, right? Make sure that when you're turning, you're using your turn signals, your brake lights work. Be alert for tailgaters. Slow down gradually. Don't slam on the brakes, right? Because if somebody is coming right behind you, then they're not going to have time to stop if you stop quickly. And then leave room in front of you when you're stopped so that if you're hit from behind, you're not going to hit the vehicle in front of you. That's one of the worst things is when you get hit behind and you're just sitting there and now you've rear-ended somebody else and you're at fault for rear-ending that person that's in front of you, right? So make sure you give yourself, especially when you're stopped at a stoplight and those type of places, enough room so that if you're hit from the back, you're not going to hit that person that's in front of you. Make sure you're looking for those hazards, right? And approaching everything with caution and really paying attention to what's going on. Make sure you're obeying traffic rules and use common sense, right? Just like we say with the KMU Common Sense program. Defensive drivers obey traffic rules and use common sense. You follow the speed limit. You make sure that you're stopping at red lights. You are not hitting the gas when you see the yellow light, right? You are judging whether you should stop or whether you should continue on through when you see a yellow light. You want to make sure that you are using the 2-second rule. This means you should always stay at least 2 seconds behind the vehicle in front of you. And then you allow more distance at night or in bad weather, kind of like we talked about before. Right? So do you know how you can tell if you're 2 seconds behind another vehicle? Simple, right? You just know when the vehicle in front of you passes a sign or a utility pole, and then you count 1, 2. If you pass the sign or pole or whatever it is before you've counted to 2, then you're too close, right? So that's the easiest way to do it. Another thing you do is, as a defensive driver, is you signal your intentions, right? Anytime you're going to change lanes or do anything out of the lane, move, turn off of the road or whatever it is you're going to do, make sure that you use your signals to do that. All right? Keep alert and be prepared. Keep your mind on your driving and your hands on the wheel. Scan the road ahead for problems. We're going to watch a video here in just a second that talks about scanning and making sure that you're looking for other hazards, kind of like the hazards we showed in the previous vehicle, or the previous video. This is the number one thing you can do from a situational awareness standpoint, right? Keep your eyes on the road and be scanning for issues. And when you're scanning for the issues, when you see a potential, like, oh, there's a car up there that may not stop at the intersection, you have to think about, what am I going to do? All right, I can start to slow down a little bit to see if they're going to stop, or if I don't have time to slow down, I can veer to the left or veer to the right or whatever it is that you need to do. Be thinking about that as you're coming up to that situation in case you have to make some sort of evasive maneuvers. Check your mirrors frequently. Expect the unexpected. Like I said before with that trash truck and the car behind the trash truck. If you expect there to be something and there's not, no harm, no foul, right? But if you don't expect it to be there and it's there and it takes you by surprise, surprise is the worst thing that can happen when you're driving. That's when you're most likely to make a mistake and most likely to get into an accident, or not necessarily make a mistake, but not be able to do what you need to do to prevent the accident from happening, right? So we're going to watch another video on search and scan. This I really like the way that this is presented, and I think that it makes some really good points about our third focus area, which is situational awareness. So take a look at this video.
The search and scan lesson takes your scanning skills to the next level by teaching you where to look, what you're looking for, and alerting you to driving situations that require more of your attention. Take a second and visualize how far you look down the road while you're driving. 5 feet? 10 feet? Down to the intersection? If you're not looking all the way to the horizon, you're not giving yourself the time you need to think and react to what you see. With your eyes up to the horizon, your ride will be a lot smoother, and you're in a good place to start your scanning pattern. Of course, this is the most critical place to look when you're on the road. Research shows that looking away from the forward path for longer than 2 seconds increases your chance for a crash. After looking away, your attention should return to the windshield for at least 4 more seconds before you glance away to the next spot. Scanning's like reading a book. You do it from left to right. Here's the next key place to look. Your mirrors not only help you see what's behind you, but also what is moving around you. This is especially important when you're changing lanes or merging. Before your 2 seconds is up, move your eyes back to the forward path for at least 4 seconds, and then check your gauges. Don't trust your gut feeling for speed. It's just not reliable. Make sure you're within the speed limit. Also, if you are aware of your gas gauge and engine warning lights, you'll be sure to avoid unpleasant surprises. Now it's back to the front and on your center mirror. Keep an eye on tailgaters or cars that are about to pass. Then bring your eyes back to the front so you can see what's approaching. Finish your scan by taking a look at the mirror on your right. Now you end up where you started, alert and looking to the horizon. You've finished a full scan. What happens if you actually see something in your scan? And if you do see something, how do you know if it deserves your attention? There's a whole lot happening around you all the time. You've got to be able to pick out the hot spots quickly and react safely. Hot spots are anything that make your driving environment unsafe, like moving vehicles, bicyclists, and pedestrians. Once you've identified a hot spot, you need to adjust your scanning pattern by dividing your attention between the forward view, 4 seconds, and the hot spot, 2 seconds. This will help you to know what to expect and help you prevent a collision. It's time to give your teen the chance to show off what they've learned. Help your teen practice scanning regularly and attending to the hot spots.
All right, so that really shows what we're trying to talk about with defensive driving, right? Those search and scan, making sure that you're aware of the conditions that are out there and that you're giving yourself enough time in order to react to anything that either you expect to happen or the unexpected that you can plan for, right? So we're going to continue on with just a few more things that you can do to be even better defensive driver besides the search and scan and the hazard recognition and the situational awareness that we were talking about. We talked earlier about road conditions and how different road conditions can affect you, right? So what do you do when you have adverse road conditions, bad weather, those type of things? The first thing, and I mentioned this before, slow down. Right? Just because the speed limit's 70 doesn't mean you need to go 70. So if you slow down, you're going to have more reaction time. Turn on your lights, turn on your wipers, increase your following distance. Remember we talked about having 2 seconds between following distance between you and the car in front of you? Increase that to 4. Double it. Give yourself more reaction time. Because if it's slippery and you go to hit the brakes, you are not going to stop as fast when it's slippery out as if the road conditions were dry. That's just one example, right? Try to avoid puddles. You don't know how deep those puddles are going to be. You don't know if you're going to hydroplane, especially if you're going faster, and skid right off of the road. So really take time to avoid puddles. Make sure that you're watching for those. Be aware of misty rain after a dry spell, right? That moisture mixes with road oil and can create a slick surface. So just because it's not raining really hard doesn't mean that there's not going to be slick spots out there. Be prepared to handle a skid safely. So what do you do in the event of a skid? Does anybody know what you do? Well, if you skid, take your foot off the gas first, right? Then turn the wheel in the direction that you want the front of the car to go. Make sure you use a light touch and keep your foot off of the brake, okay? For example, if the back of your car is skidding to the right, That means the front of the car is heading to the left. To regain control and come out of the skid safely, you should turn the wheel gently to the right. So if you're skidding to the right, you turn to the right. If you're skidding to the left, you turn to the left. Now this doesn't mean that you jerk it. You want to do it very lightly. And again, you do not want to put your foot on the brake. If you put out your foot on the brake, it will make the skid go even faster and even farther. Okay, so take your foot off the gas and turn into the skid. One last defensive driving technique for bad weather is to, of course, beware of icy patches, right? Remember that bridges, overpasses, shady spots, those kind of places are going to freeze first. So the road may be nice and dry or may not be slick, but when you hit some of those overpasses where the wind has been able to come under the road and freeze the road from down below, you have a much greater chance that that part of the road is frozen. So you may skid or slide on those overpasses. So try not to pass other cars on the overpasses. Don't make lane changes on those type of areas, overpasses and bridges. Try to maintain your course with as little movement as possible, because anytime you change lanes, speed up, slow down, that's when those bad weather conditions are really going to affect the way that your driving is, right? All right, we talked about nighttime, right? Be extra careful at night. You got to watch out for the glare. Keep your windshield clean. Dirty windshield, again, will cause more glare, make it harder to see. Make sure if you don't have automatic lights that you're turning them on a half hour before sunset, or if it's raining out, you want to do it even sooner than that when it starts raining. Increase following distance to 4 seconds, just like in bad weather conditions. Be extra careful on curves and at intersections. Switch from high to low beams to keep from blinding other drivers. So if you do need those high beams, when you see another driver coming, switch to your low beams so that you don't blind them. And if you have trouble driving at night, pull completely off of the road and use your flashers. If you're having some sort of mechanical issue or you just have to get all the way off, turn your hazard lights on so that somebody that's coming up, they'll be able to assess the situation correctly and not think that you're stopped in the middle of the road. Watch out for the fatigue. We talked about fatigue earlier, right? Especially when you're driving late at night, early in the morning. A lot of people feel fatigue at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you're feeling those things, stop, right? Stop and take a quick nap. A 15 or 20-minute nap can make a huge difference and really reduce your fatigue. Or if you have chronic issues with those times, try not to drive during those periods where you know you're going to be fatigued. When you're driving long distances, take a break. Get out, get your blood flowing, walk around a little bit at a rest area or gas station. Get your heart rate up a little bit and get moving, and that will help you reduce your fatigue also, and avoid medications that can cause drowsiness. We talked about rude driving and aggressive driving, right? Remember to keep cool in traffic. Keep your emotions in check. Remember that 2 or 3 seconds, by passing that one car and getting 2 or 3 seconds ahead, even if you get half a mile down the road ahead before you get off at the exit, you're saving yourself maybe 30 seconds. Really, what are you going to do with those 30 seconds, right? So keep your cool, keep your emotions in check, stay relaxed, right? Allow yourself enough time to get there so you don't feel like you have to hurry and you have to get in that rush. The difference between going 60 miles an hour and 70 miles an hour if you're only going 5 miles down the road is less than a minute, right? It's not going to make any difference. By trying to speed and go fast and tailgate people, you're not going to make any noticeable difference on the time that you get there, right? Don't provoke other drivers. I think in this day and age, that's pretty good advice to take. And then if you really have aggressive drivers that are causing hazards, report them to the police, because you never know how long that person's going to be driving like that down the road, and if they're going to cause an accident or something on down the road, right? Don't drink and drive. We talked about this. Alcohol and drugs impair your ability to determine distances, reaction time, judgment, vision. Remember that you can't drink a bunch of drinks and then have coffee or something to sober you up. Only time really sobers you up, right? So have a designated driver. If you drink at all, don't drive. If you're going to drive, don't drink. Just make it that simple, and that will help you prevent those human errors from causing an accident. Lastly, I want to talk about if you are involved in an accident, move to the side of the road, turn off the ignition for your car, perform a quick first aid check, make sure everybody in the car is fine, maybe people in the other car, make sure they're not injured. call the police, call for emergency services if needed, collect insurance, registration information, get a copy of the police report, take pictures of the accident scene. One thing you don't want to do is point blame or discuss fault or get into an argument with another driver. That's not the time or the place, and it's not going to help your situation at all. So this has been defensive driving, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this class. And if you have any questions, you can always feel free to contact me here at KMU. My email address is bmeek@kmunet.org. That's bmeek@kmunet.org. Feel free to email me with any questions at any time. I hope you enjoyed this course, and I'll look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.